Hello? You can hear me. Thank you. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. First, I'd like to say congratulations to Faisal. You've done a brilliant job. You've put together a superb team. They really are a very good team. I was so happy to see so many new faces. And that brings me to the first reform, the limited term for Prime Minister. I think that is a reform that nearly happened with the previous government, the PH government, not the PN government, PH government. It nearly happened. So all the documentation, etc., is already there, as far as I recall. So that is something that we must push forward. When you look at the faces on stage today, you see many new faces, some old faces. It's good to mix. It's inclusive. And it can only augur well for the country. So change is good. Leadership change is good. We're not, I mean, Bersih, it's every 2 years there's a change. So I think that is something, the first reform, that should not take very long. Don't forget, this government works very faster. When they wanted to amend the federal constitution, they worked very fast. So the reforms we are asking for, they should work just as fast. Of course, some of those amendments to the federal constitution we do not agree with. Now, when I made my list, I was only going to talk about 4 or 5 reforms because I only have 10 minutes. But as I started writing, I kept writing and writing and writing because there were so many reforms that have not been implemented, reforms that are not difficult to do. And I'll start with my first one. The first one is the limited term. The second one is the Sedition Act. Why do we still have this Sedition Act? We've been fighting against it for the longest time. This government was fighting against it. Members of this government were fighting against it for the longest time. Now, what I've realized is, when you're not in power, you don't like the Sedition Act, and we're right not to like it. It's an archaic piece of legislation. But once people get into power, they love it. Why? I don't understand. That's why we need the leadership really to listen to the people. It doesn't suit us, this country that is supposed to be democratic. The Sedition Act must go. And I think that is one loud message we can pass. Of course, the other one is SOSMA. We have so many other restrictive legislation. Printing, Presses and Publications Act. We still have licensing. It's ridiculous. Let me tell you, all this legislation is very old. I don't know why we think it's relevant today. So we must take steps to repeal all these legislation. I mean, look at performances being cancelled. Somebody just has to make a police report. Everything is put on halt. MC acts on social media, postings, etc. All of that is about interfering with freedom of speech. So that those reforms must happen. These are reforms we fought for together with members of the current government. We fought for this. Bersih fought for this. And we will continue to fight for this. You talked about hope, Faisal. I think it was Greta Thunberg who said, all well and good to hope, but it's of no use. You got to fight. You got to fight. And I think we must insist on this. There is no excuse for the government to drag its feet on these key amendments because it will make Malaysia a better place. It will make Malaysia a better place. Number 3, corruption. Fine. I think what's going on, we can all see, yeah? We're not blind, okay? We know what's going on. Weaponizing the MACC is not acceptable. You don't weaponize it just to pick on certain people. If you're serious about fighting corruption, you change the system. For example, one of them are appointments. In fact, appointments to all these key authorities must go through Parliament. They must set that up. That will change everything. You will get better people there. You'll get people who really deserve to be there. MACC itself, there are many things that can be done to change it. If you just look at the way the IACC is run in Hong Kong, etc., you will actually improve their independence. And in fact, one of the things that was suggested, or recommended, is that you embed them into the federal constitution. But now I'm afraid to even suggest that, actually. Maybe don't. But at least do whatever you can to make it absolutely independent. And I think if we don't start with that, fixing our public enforcement authorities, then it becomes very, very difficult to make major changes in these issues. So you also have the IPCMC. We've been fighting for that. We were this close to getting it done under the previous PH government. Very close. Another missed opportunity. Another missed opportunity. So all the work has been done. All the drafting has been done, as far as I understand it. It just has to be implemented. Now, the accountability of the police is through the EAIC, all right? They've now revamped it a little bit. And that is not enough, because that body has no enforcement powers. So that is something that is also good for society, because enforcement authorities have direct interaction with the public. That's why what they do, how they do it, must be transparent. And so that's another reform that is outstanding. Now, I also think the Police Commission, the IPCMC, is important, because you need to also make it more viable to be a policeman. You need to look after the policeman as well. Those are issues that can be addressed. Now, I also, one of the things that was called for is a reopening of investigations. For 3 things, I suggest. There will be more, but for 3 things. The Teo Beng Hock murder, Pastor Koh's disappearance, and Indira Gandhi's daughter. All these 3 things cannot happen in a civilized society without getting answers. And we cannot, because of time, we cannot forget about it, because you can never get over it. So what's happened in all the 3 cases is you have court orders, in some case, Indira Gandhi's, you have Suhakam's findings, you have so many other bodies who have found some elements of criminality or some issues with those, with the 3, and still nothing can be done. How is that possible? With Indira Gandhi, she hasn't seen her daughter since she was 18 months. How is that acceptable in a civilized society? And the thing is, we cannot forget, because they assume people will forget, and that'll be the end of that. Teo Beng Hock, never forget. You know why? Pastor Koh, never forget. You know why? Because it'll happen again if we forget. So that's another one. Now, the appointments process for all appointments, EC Chair, MACC, Police Commission, etc., should go through Parliament. There must be a different process, independent process for such appointments. Just a few more points before I conclude. We must abolish corporal punishment. Now, corporal punishment means whipping. We have the mandatory death penalty was abolished, not by this government, by the government of Ismail Sabri. And that was very good, actually. But that's just the start. I'm a proponent of abolishing the whole of the death penalty, okay? But that's a conversation for another day. Corporal punishment, which is whipping, is also something that civilized societies don't do. So that's another thing. I mean, if you've seen videos of how that happens, corporal punishment, it's terrible. I don't know whether any of you have seen how it happens. The way in which the whipping takes place, you see prisoners who can't get up after they've been whipped once. So that's another thing that should be addressed. Statelessness. Statelessness, unfortunately for this government, and this was unnecessary. Did anyone ask this government to amend the constitution, not any legislation, the federal constitution, to make more children stateless. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? So they put in the amendment that we fought for, which is for mothers who had children overseas should be given citizenship. They put that in, but with that, they brought in two other amendments that are completely unacceptable. And they did it so fast. That's why I'm telling you, if they want to act, they can act very fast. So that has not gone through because of all the outcry by the public. But why did the public have to go through all that trouble? Why did they have to make those amendments, which don't make sense at all? So that's another thing. I hope it never, those amendments that we are against, the public spoke about, should never come back, because it makes children more vulnerable, babies. So it makes them more vulnerable. We must never allow those amendments to come back. But we want the amendment that gives citizenship to children born overseas, to Malaysian parents. We want that amendment to go through. Now, finally, I would like to talk about women, the position of women. Yes, you may say this, you don't know whether it needs legislative reform. It doesn't need legislative reform. It needs a difference in the thought process. The number of women in places of power are so much fewer than a progressive country should have. So women must be given positions of authority and power in government, much more than they are being given. And that is something the youth, you all must fight for it. Fight for it. Any government that has more women is better. I can guarantee you that. It will be better. Now, finally, I want to say this. All right, sorry, two more quick things. Constituency funds. Why is there such a fuss about giving constituency funds to the opposition? Why are they getting less? None of that is right. And that is something else Bersih can also push for. Because you know what that means? It means you have no respect for the voters who voted for the person who is in opposition. It is about respecting the voters. You think they are lesser, so you give them less. You're not allowing them to do their work. So that has to be done. Final two things, racism. Racism needs leadership. And we better get the leadership to stem the racism that we see. The UITM issue, I'm sorry, this is my personal opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody else, and I think a lot of people feel the same way, is appalling. I'm so terrified to see potential doctors, okay, and the youth, and they're young, thinking the way that they do. Whereas most of us, and I can see all those standing here, don't feel the same way. So I think these voices must be loud. We must stop this sort of racism. My last point, for God's sakes, take climate change seriously. This government, and I know Nick Nazmi, good minister, he is looking at it, but you still see so much unnecessary development going on. And I think that is another thing that the government should look at. So that, am I done with 10 minutes? Yes, I might have gone over. Thank you very much.